Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from legal expert Michael Joseph. I'm Matt Skye. Michael is a seasoned attorney with over 20 years of experience in personal injury, commercial litigation, and criminal defense. Based in Manhattan and White Plains, New York, Michael is committed to social justice and providing accessible legal representation for all. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Michael, let's get into it. How common are pedestrian accidents in New York State?
If you think about the amount of people that are walking across streets in New York City, in Manhattan, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and you think about the number of the cars that are on the road, human nature being what it is, there's going to be inattention, there's got to be distractions. Pedestrians being hit by cars is basically something that's just going to happen. It's a foregone conclusion. It's a reality. That's why we're here, to help these people and to represent people who have been hit by cars and injured in car accidents.
And what are the most common injuries you're seeing people suffer from when it comes to these pedestrian accidents?
Usually injuries from when they're first hit, for example, knee injuries. And then we see the other injuries, for example, a lot of fractures. We see fractures, especially in the hands and arms, when people put their hands out in front of them to try and protect themselves from the oncoming car. We see a lot of knee injuries and back injuries and neck injuries from people when people are kind of thrown from the car onto the ground or pushed onto the ground from the impact of the car. We see a lot of shoulder injuries. So rotator cuffs, meniscal tears, these are all the most common kinds of injuries you'll see from a pedestrian who's hit by a car.
What rights would someone have if they're hit by a driver with no insurance?
Okay, if you're hit by either a driver with no insurance, an uninsured motorist, or a driver that flees the scene, a lot of people just think they're out of luck and they have no options. That's not true. New York law provides remedies for people who have been either hit by an uninsured driver or a driver that flees the scene. You know, one of the most common questions we get asked is, driver fled the scene, what can I do? Okay. And a lot of people think, just because you can't identify the driver, that's not necessary. That's the end of it. Well, that's not true. The reality is most drivers that flee the scene of the accidents are not going to be identified. Even though we have a lot of surveillance these days, the surveillance really isn't good enough to be able to identify a license plate for the most part. Once in a while, we get lucky. Once in a while, the police are able to identify a license plate in the driver. And in those cases, we can sue the drivers. And we can get people the benefits they're entitled to. Cases where the drivers can't be identified or they don't have insurance, people can look to their own insurance company or any insurance in their own household. There's a provision called uninsured motorist benefits. And what that means is if you're hit by a driver that doesn't have insurance, you can look to your own insurance company to provide the benefits that driver was obligated to provide you. And that includes wages for medical benefits, lost wages, which are generally considered to be no-fault benefits. And also, you can bring a claim against your own insurance company for personal injuries and pain and suffering caused by the driver that was uninsured. Now, in the case of a driver that fled the scene of the accident, the same kind of rules apply. There's what's called unidentified motorist coverage. Now, there's a few wrinkles that you have to jump through. For example, you have to have reported the accident within 24 hours of the accident occurring to the police. So it's highly, highly important, very important, to get a police report done. Because if you don't have a police report, you just go home and you don't really report it, you're not going to be able to pursue one of these cases. You're not going to be able to seek the benefits that you get. In the case of a hit and run, you have to get a police report. And after you get the police report, you can file a claim for uninsured motorist benefits with either your own car insurance company or the policy of anybody else in the household if you don't have your own car. Now, another question we hear a lot is young people in New York City, they don't have cars. Most people in Manhattan don't have cars. So what do you do if you don't have a car and you're hit by a car either that doesn't have insurance, or what do you do if you're a young person who doesn't have a car and you're hit by a car that fled the scene and you can't identify him? Well, New York has a fund called the Motor Vehicle Accident Indemnification Corp. We call it MVAC, which is the acronym. And basically what MVAC does is they provide the same benefits that the driver that fled the scene or the uninsured driver would have had to provide if they had New York's basic coverage. So basically, MVAC provides the minimum insurance coverages for people who are hit in either vehicles that flee the scene or vehicles that don't have insurance. And what are those basic benefits? It's up to $50,000 for lost wages and medical payments combined, and another $25,000 for pain and suffering for an injury. So if you get hit by a car that flees the scene, don't worry, get the police report, document that what happened. You're not out of luck. There are remedies and things you can do.
So, Michael, what are the procedural requirements if you get hit by a bus?
All right. If you get hit by a bus in New York, most of the buses are owned by either the New York City Transit Authority, MTA Bus Company, or the Metropolitan Transit Authority, which means they're public entities. And that means within 90 days of the accident, you have to file a notice of claim, putting them on notice of the intent to sue them. And if you don't do that, you could be barred from suing. And if you blow the timeline, you actually have to go to court, make a showing of that the bus wasn't prejudiced, that they had notice of the accident and other things. And then you have to ask the court for special permission. Now, some judges are more lenient than others. Some are more conservative. So you're taking your chances. So why take that chance? Don't give them the opportunity to beat the case on technicality. You file the notice of claim. And we do that day in, day out. Also, to get the no-fault benefits that you're entitled to from the bus company, you have to file an application for no-fault benefits within 30 days. New York system is a trap for the unwary. It's a legal gauntlet. You don't want to try and do this without a seasoned attorney who knows the ropes and knows how to handle these cases.
So what happens if the pedestrian is partially at fault for the accident that caused their injuries? I'm sure that happens sometimes.
Well, New York has what's called comparative fault, which means that at the end of the day, a judge or a jury is going to make an assessment of what percentage the pedestrian is versus what percent the bus driver is, or what percent the other driver is, if it's a car and truck or whatever. So typically there's 100% of the fault, and the trier of fact, be it a judge or jury, is going to have to say whether the vehicle was 100% at fault, the pedestrian was 100% at fault, or there was some split. For example, if the bus was going too fast or making a turn and not paying attention, but then the pedestrian had to walk out or try to get across the street in front of the bus, maybe there's some split. Maybe they say the pedestrian is 25% at fault. In that case, what happens is you get off the bus, or the defendant in the civil case gets an offset for the amount of fault that the injured party is at fault for, basically. So if you're 25% at fault, basically 25% gets taken off of whatever you ultimately can recover. So basically, the at-fault defendant only has to pay their share of the culpability.
Now, we covered this a bit. How common is it that pedestrians are struck by a vehicle that leaves the scene?
People being hit by vehicles that leave the scene is more common than you think. And if you're the person who's injured, one time is enough. So you'll see what we've kind of realized in cases where people have been caught after fleeing the scene is usually it's because there's something wrong with them. In other words, either the vehicle's stolen, or they're drunk, they've been driving drunk, or they have a suspended license. So usually, more and more you'll see people with these kind of issues involved in accidents. If they're drinking and driving, with the penalties getting more and more severe every day, people are fleeing the scene rather than sticking around. So in a population the size of New York City and the surrounding areas, including Westchester, Long Island, it's going to happen. People are going to, there are a lot of unlicensed drivers on the road. There are a number of people joyriding. There's people with stolen cars. And in some cases, people that get in a crash, they're going to flee the scene. So I think if you're involved in a hit and run accident or an accident with an uninsured driver, you want an attorney who's done this before and who knows the ropes, because it really is a legal quagmire. It really is a legal gauntlet where one misstep can cost you your benefits.
Maybe if you can lay out for us step by step what someone should do in a circumstance like that, and how they can ultimately, hopefully, recover financially from a case where they've been in a hit and run.
If you've been in a hit and run, the first step is to contact the police. Get a police report, because you want it documented that it happened. If you let more than 24 hours go by, even if you're telling the truth, it doesn't matter. There's this procedural thing you have to do to be able to pursue a claim. Think of it, you have to dot an I and cross a T. If that I isn't dotted, if that T isn't crossed, you're not going to be able to pursue your case, no matter how legitimate it is. You could be hit by a car and be very seriously injured. But if you don't get that police report and you just try to go ahead and take Motrin and sleep it off, or try to recover an ice your injuries, you're not going to be able to pursue the case. The court will throw you out. I could do everything right. I could file a summons, a complaint, and the court will say, well, where's your report to the police? I say, well, Judge, my client was hit by this car. It took off. He's got broken legs. He's got this and that. Okay, that's great. Where's your police report? So it's very important to dot the I's, cross the T's, get the police report. If you're able to get a picture of the fleeing vehicle, that helps. Certainly, I think you want to go to the hospital and make sure that the so that the hospital can document what injuries you have while the injuries are still fresh. And certainly take the appropriate steps to identify whether you have a vehicle, either in your own name or in your household, that's obligated to provide the medical benefits, or if not, you have to do an application to the MVAC, which requires certain affidavits and proof in the police report.
And Michael, what kind of damages are available to a pedestrian in these types of personal injury cases?
For a pedestrian that's been hit by a vehicle that fled the scene, you can bring a claim against your own insurance company for pain and suffering. And really, the only limit to what you can recover is the limit of your own insurance. So basically, the only cap is the amount of available insurance. And really, the nature, what you can get depends really on the nature and extent of your injuries and the treatment you had to have and what losses you've sustained as a result.
Now, what about cases where injuries are not maybe immediately apparent? Someone perhaps thinks they got hit, but it was relatively mild. How do you suggest people handle cases in that way?
Well, just because you're not feeling it at the moment the accident happened doesn't mean you're not injured. Your body has a natural shock mechanism that kind of protects you, but while people are still undergoing shock, they don't always realize they're injured. And certain types of injuries, for example, are notorious for popping up later. Knee injuries, if your knee can just be a little sore, but then as you start to walk on it, it gets worse and worse. Sometimes what happens is you have a small tear in the meniscus, for example, or one of the ligaments, and as you start to walk on it and try to live your normal life, the tear gets bigger and bigger and bigger and worse and worse. Same thing with back injuries. A lot of times if you have a back injury, you may not feel it for a day or two. Why? Because it's the nerve that's injured. And if you think of like squeezing a garden hose, where you squeeze it at one end and the water shoots out funny at the other end, sometimes if it's injured in the back, it takes some time for the pain mechanisms to work, or the sensation to work its way down the line of the nerve for your body to sense that it's injured. So back injuries, neck injuries, especially with nerves, are notorious for popping up a few days up to a week later. Same thing with the shoulders and knees. Then you may have some pain, and then later on, they start to hurt worse and worse because as you're using them, that's when you start to feel it. Sometimes, ironically, in the case of, say, a shoulder tear or a rotator cuff tear, where in a very bad rotator cuff tear, the nerve is actually severed. And where the nerve is severed or mostly severed, it can't generate the pain response. It's not until it starts to regenerate itself and start to come back that you start to feel the pain response. Just if you're hurt and you're feeling pain, see a doctor, let a doctor make the decision of what's wrong with you, because they have tests they could do, there's imaging, and they can see what's wrong. Don't try to treat yourself.
I'm sure you've seen many over the years, Michael, but do you have any difficult pedestrian accident cases that come to mind where you were able to secure a favorable outcome?
In pedestrian accident cases, I can't think of a single case where we haven't secured a favorable outcome. Why? Because the law is strong on the side of pedestrians. We have a lot of experience in winning pedestrian accident cases. In fact, most of our pedestrian accident cases, we went on summary judgment, and it becomes only a question of how much the case is worth down the line, because the law is so strong for pedestrians.
And how do you make sure you maximize those settlements? How do you ensure the largest takeaway for your clients?
One of the things we try to do is we try to use good evidence. We try to, for example, if a person's going to have surgery or has surgery, we encourage them to have a friend or family member take pictures of them so we can document their condition and what it was like for them, so a judge or jury can get a feel for what they really went through. And one of the big things we do to maximize our clients' recoveries is where a client's out of work and not able to work because of an accident and because of an injury, we hire economists to really calculate and hone in on not just what they were making at the time, but what their potential was and what the effects of inflation are. Because with inflation, for example, people usually make more year after year after year. Now, if you're a construction worker and you are making, $100,000 last year and you can't go do that kind of work anymore, well, you're not only losing $100,000 per year, you're losing your benefits, you're losing, your fringe benefits, your vacation, your pension benefits. You're losing, and you're losing the increases that you would have gotten under your union contract throughout the course of time. So we often work with economists to give us economic opinions on what the full value of the loss is, in other words, and give us opinions on the total amount that the person actually lost as a result of the accident.
It's actually a pretty interesting team you assemble. As we wrap up, if you had one major takeaway for our listeners and viewers today, what would that be?
So if you're injured in an accident, don't sit on your hands. Call a lawyer, get the forms done, get the accident report, call the police, seek medical treatment, because the first couple weeks after an accident are important timelines. And whatever you do, don't blow the timeline. You get the help you need, and make sure that you take all the necessary steps that you need to be able to get the benefits you're entitled to.
I think that's a great point to wrap on. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to Trial Talk, insights from legal expert Michael Joseph. For more information or to connect with Michael, visit newyorktriallawyers.org. Michael, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.